Ja.
And we'll be happy to welcome Niklas, who will present some of the key thoughts and thinking that you've been doing for the National Library. And as we all know, some of the cultural heritage institutions are actually the ones that we pass forward into the data, which are in some ways are in the forefront. But and as you mentioned last year, some of the things on the outside looks really nice and polished with the good data structures, and then you have your existing old catalog systems that is not as structured and as nice. So you've been trying to match, make those unstructured. They're structured inside, but not according to the standards. No. So with further ado, Niklas, and just shout to me, and I will do my presentation stuff here.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So hello, as Fredrik said, I'm from the National Library of Sweden, and what we do is that we collect legal deposits from everybody who's publishing in Sweden or in Swedish, and we've been doing this since I think at least a couple of 100 years. Originally, it was intended for censorship, but then the purpose got shifted so that we would just provide canonical copies of the material that has been published in Sweden. We also serve as a hub for the National Union Catalog, which is comprised of the bibliographical information and the holdings information that all the libraries in Sweden, which are members of the Libris collective, share together. Mainly the municipal libraries and educational libraries and universities and high schools and things like that, and also some research libraries. Also, we have, as a government agency, a mission to provide open and shared information which can be used beyond the library and public sectors, so that everybody should be able to take part of what we're trying to collect and maintain and consolidate. Our current work, we aren't that many which do this part of the work. We are like a group of half a dozen people or so who, from time to time, some of us full-time, focus on upgrading some of our systems to use linked data. We use this because we need to reduce the redundancy of information which is copied all throughout the various systems that we have. And also we're trying to make it easier to reuse the data by creating recognizable shapes and sharing the vocabularies that we use throughout the various we have. That's apart from the National Union Catalog, is largely a collection of authorities, which are definitions of the people, the authors, and other people who are associated with the things that have been created. We also have lots of topics and subject headings, along with a bunch of definitions for events and geographical places. We also have definitions of material types and things like that. All of these definitions originate from somewhere else, but they have come into our systems mainly through copying of the definitions and reusing things in the systems internally. And that kind of makes things difficult to consolidate and collate when we integrate various systems today. Also, we have lots of other smaller systems which we try to take on piece by piece. And this reality, these systems are, depending on how you count them, in the hundreds, although some of the systems are actually just Excel files on a shared server somewhere. But there is a constant flurry of projects and activities and collaborations throughout our organization. And since we don't have that much of an IT budget compared to corporate organizations, we strive to maintain some kind of coherence as far as we can. And this is what it often feels like. I've been a consultant for a decade or so before I started working for the National Library, and I felt like this most of the time, especially when I worked for government agencies. Things tend to be jerry-rigged in some way and tend to be very difficult to maintain after a while without hazardous results if you try to tamper with the wiring. What we try to do is to play a game of sticks with this situation and find pieces that we can actually extract and analyze how they are connected. And working over time, we're trying to maintain something which can be easier to reuse, and then take each other part and try to reintegrate these other systems with the stuff that we try to consolidate as linked data. So this brings us to what we are currently working on finalizing and publishing to be accessible for the world in general. We mainly work on the cataloging system that we have, because we have a huge responsibility to ensure that the users of the National Union Catalog, i.e. the members of the Libris collective, can get more efficient use of this Union Catalog. So we're changing the internal data structure, which currently, as Phil alluded to, is structured as MARC data, which I will not show you and nobody should ever be shown. And try to reshape that as far as we are able to into linked data. Specifically, we use JSON-LD as the format of choice, because that makes it easier for us to work with consultants who only know web technologies and aren't privy to the entire semantic web stack yet. Doing that, we have started to roll out the first parts of our new web-based cataloging tool, which we will continue to work on over time during the year.
Let's go for
that one. Yeah. No,
this
one. One of the backbone sticks in this game of sticks we play is, as I mentioned, the authorities that we have, which is the topics and the persons and the places and the definitions, including, of course, the vocabularies themselves, the terms, the relations between the things in the system. We want to publish this as transparently as possible under the domain id.kb.se. And in doing this, we have to ensure that we expose the sources, the origins of these definitions. Hitherto, there have been lists in documentation telling you how you should pick out certain things, but we haven't published the actual sources. And most of these sources come from the Library of Congress in the States, United States. And these resources are published as linked data there. So when we have a definition in our system for a language, it's usually the definition from the Library of Congress lists of languages, which in turn is based on the other standard definitions for languages. I don't remember the ISO names. It's the 6 something something, and then there are various flavors of that as well. Which brings us to one part of the problem, because there is rarely one source of definitions. So we have this hub to publish our own definitions and link them and interlink them to the other sources, and ensuring that we have tools available for automatic synchronization and consolidation of this, so that we don't maintain this problem of copying data. Also, we want to ensure that the things that we build can use other parts of descriptions from other parts of the web. And apart from the things that are already structured as linked data, such as DBpedia and Wikidata and geonames, we want to enable, for instance, bloggers who publish reviews of books to be able to link to our bibliographical records or to something which our bibliographical records are linked to, for instance, Wikipedia or Wikidata definitions of works from famous authors, and integrate this. So to be able to leverage the growing web of data, we focus a lot on schema.org types and also take part in collaborating with schema.org through, for instance, the bibliographic extensions that have fairly successfully been working to extend schema.org with various types of information which libraries focus on. As I mentioned earlier, we internally use JSON-LD, which is the details that we work with when we build our services right now. We use lots of dynamic languages and Elasticsearch and things like that to fairly quickly build various user interfaces and search engines on top of this. But we have a fundamental commitment to ensure that we do not invent things in doing so. We try to ensure that even if we need to build some kind of custom APIs for search, if there is something to build upon, which there usually is, for instance, the linked data API originating from the Gov UK work on building an easier access point to linked data, which is more palatable to developers than Sparkle, but is still mappable to RDF and Sparkle and things like that. We take a shortcut by using JSON-LD directly, but in principle it works the same way. So we're trying to continuously monitor web development of the linked data standards to leverage all of that. And the linked data platform is another very useful thing to watch when we build our read-write APIs to a new cataloging system. This is just an example of how the shapes look, which we are turning MARC into. You have bibliographical record here, and then you have a record, and then some definitions for things, and interlinking that definition with the definition from Library of Congress. But as Phil also said, this does not really look like linked data if you're not looking carefully. It simply looks like just JSON, which makes it much easier for the web developers we hire and contract as consultants to just start to build services from. And regarding vocabularies, well, we, of course, do as everybody else, reinvent everything. Well, not really. We try as hard as we can to use the definitions that exist in the current vocabularies. But the problem is that they aren't really cohesive, and there are so many details in our systems that we have to ensure that we can switch which definition we rely on. One difficulty we have had is in deciding whether to use schema.org concepts and shapes or the developing shapes in BibFrame, which is a vocabulary developed by the Library of Congress, to, well, basically do the same things. And also, of course, we use the existing W3C standards when we can for SCOS, for concept. Often find that in your local subject heading system, there are more distinct specialized flavor of things. So we subclass SCOS and may define subproperties thereof. But that's the basic workflow we do. We really try to ensure that any kind of shape which is recognizable by the broader web of linked data users should be able to find out what our terms mean. We have very recently had discussions with some of the European libraries which do the same things as we do. They publish linked data from their library systems, but although they use, most of them try to use existing vocabularies, they have basically done the same thing as we have. They have defined their own terms for things they miss, and even though they use Dublin Core or Bibu or schema.org terms, we sometimes use things a little bit differently. So we're trying to work together to look at how we can consolidate and align our efforts, and also try to make sure that this effort is going back into the larger standards bodies and development of things like the schema.org bibliographic extensions as well. But we haven't really been able to work very hard on this. We, as you can see, started in December last year, so we're still trying to consolidate our various views. Also, we have recently launched datakv.se, which is the collection of data sets which we publish on the web as open data. And we have exposed this catalog, of course, using the standard vocabularies that are used for harvesting data, DCAT especially, and also the terms that have been imported from DCAT into schema.org. So we use RDFA to use a mix of many vocabularies in this. And we have representations in other formats as well of this data, so that harvesters can go about collecting this data and using it for, especially for öppnadata.se, which is going to collect this information for the national catalog of data sets from public institutions. Though the real trick in doing this work isn't really about technology at all. The hard parts is trying to understand each other. This is very visible when you see the problems with vocabulary alignment, and where everybody tries to reinvent terms because they have very specific views on what they mean, and they can't really consolidate this meaning with anybody else's. Actually, most of the time it's because they don't have time to understand what anybody else is trying to mean. So a lot of this is talking about this technology with our domain experts without using the word technology, because then they think we always use MARC and then they leave the room. Although they know MARC, they don't want to do anything else beyond what they've already been doing with MARC, which is trying to sort of tame it and game it to express what they mean. When I say that, well, you can do this with RDF, they say, well, no, that's just technology, but that's sort of missing the entire point. And if you just sit down and talk for a while, you start to find some common ground when I start to talk about entities and relations and properties, and suddenly they say, well, that sounds like the conceptual model of our bibliographic rules. And yeah, that's the same definition. And then after a while, we start to find more and more common ground. But the problem is, of course, that this common ground, although you might know that it's there or hope it is there, people rarely have the time to find out that it is there, and this is the crucial difficulty. And the same goes, of course, for collaborating internationally, because even if people are using RDF, they reinvent the terms because they don't have the time to consolidate the views perfectly. And also there is a lot of politics and branding going on. And another trick is that, well, RDF usage is actually very young. It's a fairly old standard, but MARC is sort of like, I think it was created in the 60s. So from our point of view, RDF is really just a toddler. And the actual experiences of consuming and creating RDF and the life cycle that goes into that is not really that explored yet. I think there are many ways of investigating how you can align different expressions. I think that the RDF shapes is one interesting venue, but I think that often the real problem is that people just don't have the time. They don't take the time, and they don't see that their point of views are just skewed because they have their own lenses looking at reality. Most of the time, we don't really understand that what we mean with our definitions is just a facet or a view of something which can be normalized. As I think I declared myself as a ontological nihilist at this workshop in December, and I often point that out when people think that I'm a Platonist or something like that. I'm really not. I don't believe that there is necessarily fundamental truth and meaning underneath the terms that we use, but I know that there is commonality between the terms. And I think that taking a little bit of time and learning more than one point of view might give you real insights and actually enable you to define a common term, which is a super property of the local properties you use in your own contexts. And in doing this, there are many ways to normalize and consolidate data, but after you've done that, it makes it much easier to use and share. But I think if you just think about if you know RDF, I know everybody here doesn't, but those of you who know RDF vocabularies know the term, the properties RDFS label, both name, schema name, and the SCOS pref label. And which one is the center term here? I would say RDFS label, but there are 4 different perspectives in these. And if you encounter data on the web using one of these terms, you can be sure that at least 50% of them have interpreted them from your point of view wrong. So this understanding, this kind of social and psychological process is the most important part in this work, I think. And then you have the symbols. I mean, I had a lot of meaning in using these 4 properties. So there is a kind of very effective use of semantics using IDs like that, but that's not enough. You have to understand the various uses and the perspectives to be able to find the common ground. And there are many other patterns of descriptions. I mean, this is just one string property. Then you have the composition and the various abstract levels of works and translations and all these kind of shapes that you have to understand and then decide whether you should apply or not. And the method in general should be that you should take what you have and try to see if you can find something a little bit less concrete that you can reuse in other places. Not much more, but stay for a while and reflect on the usage. Which is very hard when you have deadlines and you have budgets and limitations. And you have lots of things going on right now, which you don't have the time right now to understand could be consolidated in a way that made them more usable over time. And this is a main human problem. I mean, this has been going on for the entirety of human existence, and we can't really solve that with technology, but we should understand that technology can be used to recognize this problem and consolidate it. But you can't really sell the promised benefits of linked data as actual benefits unless you recognize that there is a lot of communication and understanding that you have to apply beyond just technology. And just respect the limits of time and resources that everyone involved in this have. But of course, the motivations is that you need to be able to improve your own efficiency and eliminate redundancy as far as possible in order to make things more effective over time. And linking shared definitions and using common vocabularies is fundamental in order to create recognition and enable the things that we've seen in part here today and seen in other demos, and things like the Google Knowledge Graph and the effects of Wikidata over time. It's just that technology is only one half of the solution. The other is the understanding itself. That's about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as you said, I mean, linking to the things that Phil was talking about is the communications and the kind of sense making, because that's the everyday problem. I think most of us in the room share that. Well, we see the light, but it's very difficult, to put the pieces together so that the other professional or practitioners actually comprehend what kind of uses they should have. And I think you also put together very good examples of the complexity of which parts of the overlapping vocabulary should I use. I mean, I've tried, well, in two different separate projects as we speak, to explain to a very efficient web developer which parts I think should be part of the things he should put into the web page, using schema.org, FOF, and some other stuff, basic things, you could think. But then when you start, to scratching the surface, you realize that, well, he has actually not understand what I've actually told him in the first workshop. So we kind of have to rearrange until, well, you run out of the limit of time and budget. So yeah. So anyone else have a question here to Niklas? Jonas?
What's wrong with Mark? Isn't it expressing? How can you transform that to a flat data structure?
To a flatter data structure?
It is, in some slides, you said, was it flat? It transformed into JSON LD.
Well, right, yeah. Well, the fundamental problem with Mark is that it doesn't have a notion of entity. It's implicit. So there is bundles of details in very strange square. It's almost like a spreadsheet. But every row is a bit different, and some rows talk about the main entity, if there is one, and some are repeated, and then you can infer that there is probably more than one main entity. So it's a very strange data structure, kind of reminiscent of XML without semantics, in which you can create all kinds of strange shapes. But how we turn it into something flatter? Well, actually, I probably mean something simpler, something more normalized, with using the RDF model or the actual entity attribute value model. And well, I'm not really sure how to explain how we do that. We do what I just explained in interpreting Mark and put that into definitions so that we can pick out the parts that seem to be applicable to an entity or an aspect of that entity, such as a format or a publishing event or person.
Thank you.